The warbroker's neural tendrils twitched with barely contained frustration as another mercenary captain terminated the holo call without so much as a farewell. That made 17 rejections in the past standard hour, and Vexthon was running out of reputable companies to contact. The contract display floated before him in the sterile confines of Nexus Station's premium negotiation suite, its terms glowing with the kind of generous payment figures that usually had mercenaries fighting each other for the privilege of acceptance. Perhaps the Zalathi Lancers, his assistant suggested, manipulating the contact database with practiced efficiency. They specialize in asymmetric warfare. Vexthon's secondary eyes rolled in their sockets. The Zalathi had been his third call. Connect me to Warpack leader Theshera. The holoprojector shimmered, resolving into the scarred visage of a Zalathi commander whose cybernetic jaw gleamed under harsh shipboard lighting. Her species had conquered 3 star systems through sheer bloody-minded persistence, and her particular unit had never lost a contract. Warbroker, Theshera acknowledged, her voice a mechanical rasp. I assume this concerns the Kepler 186 dispute. Indeed. The terms are… No. Vexthon's tendrils stiffened. You haven't examined the compensation package. Don't need to. Theshera's organic eye narrowed, while her artificial one adjusted its focus with an audible click. You're hiring against humans. Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story. A minor human colonial defense detachment, Vexthon corrected smoothly. Barely a regiment, and they're defending an isolated mining operation. The tactical assessment indicates… The tactical assessment can be used as waste disposal material, Theshera interrupted. Humans don't follow tactical assessments. They follow their own incomprehensible logic, and anyone who thinks otherwise ends up as an object lesson for the next idiot. Surely your forces are capable of handling primitive ballistic weapons and basic strategy? Theshera leaned forward, her mechanical components whirring softly. Warbroker, have you ever heard of the Tundra incident? I'm not familiar with… 67 of my best fighters, battle-hardened veterans who'd seen action across 17 systems. We were contracted to eliminate a human research outpost on Sigma Draconis 7. Simple extraction job. The humans had maybe 20 personnel, all scientists and technicians. Vexthon's interest piqued despite himself. What happened? We never found the humans, Theshera said quietly. But they found us. One by one. In ways that made no tactical sense. They turned the planet itself into a weapon, used weather patterns as cover, converted their research equipment into implements of war. By the end, my survivors were hallucinating threats in empty shadows and shooting at ice formations that looked too symmetrical. Surely you're exaggerating. I wish I were. The humans didn't just win, they traumatized a generation of Zalathi warriors. Half my veterans retired immediately after extraction. The other half still wake up screaming about footprints in the snow that led nowhere. The connection terminated. Vexthon stared at the empty hollow space, then instructed his assistant to contact the Hivemind Collective. If individual soldiers found humans disturbing, perhaps a networked intelligence would prove more resilient. The response was almost instantaneous. 1,000 voices speaking in perfect unison through a single drone representative. Warbroker Vexthon, we have reviewed your contract posting. Then you understand the lucrative nature of this opportunity. We understand that you are desperate, the collective replied with unsettling calm. This is your 18th attempt to secure mercenary support for an anti-human operation. Vexthon's primary eyes widened. The collective's information network was disturbingly comprehensive. Our analysis indicates a 97% probability that your targets are human special operations personnel masquerading as civilian defenders, the Thousand Voices continued. We decline participation. What evidence supports that assessment? Human civilians do not typically request military-grade sensor dampening equipment for mining operations. Human civilians do not establish perimeter defenses designed to channel attackers through predetermined kill zones. Human civilians do not. These could be standard security precautions. The drone's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in the quality of its voice. Warbroker, we are a networked consciousness capable of processing 17 billion simultaneous data streams. We do not experience fear as individual beings understand it. However, we have what you might call institutional memory. We remember Kepler 442b. I'm unfamiliar with that designation. A minor engagement, 43 units of our combat nodes were deployed to neutralize a human research station. The humans numbered perhaps 12 individuals. Our tactical analysis predicted complete victory within 2 standard hours. And the engagement lasted 6 days. The humans systematically dismantled our network coherence using psychological warfare techniques that should have been impossible against a distributed consciousness. They created feedback loops in our communication systems, introduced recursive doubt algorithms into our decision matrices, and somehow convinced 17% of our units that their fellow nodes were enemy infiltrators. Vexthon felt a chill despite the station's controlled atmosphere. How is that possible? We still don't know. The humans appeared to understand our network architecture better than we did. By the end, we were a fragmented collection of individuals fighting each other, while the humans observed from concealed positions. They didn't defeat us. They convinced us to defeat ourselves. The connection closed. 3 hours later, Vexthon had exhausted his list of premier mercenary companies. The responses varied in detail, but the underlying theme remained consistent. Nobody wanted to fight humans. The Thermal Lords cited unusual casualty patterns from previous engagements. The Voidwalkers mentioned something called the Echo Chamber Massacre. Even the notoriously suicidal Berserker cults had politely declined, suggesting that death in human combat wasn't the honorable kind they preferred. "Sir," his assistant ventured carefully, "perhaps we should advise the client to reconsider their objectives." Vexthon's tendrils writhed in agitation. The client has made their position clear. The human operation on Kepler 186 represents a territorial violation that cannot be tolerated. Then perhaps we should look beyond the premium contractors. You're suggesting we hire amateurs? I'm suggesting we hire someone desperate enough to take the contract without asking questions about the opposition. Vexthon considered this. It galled him to resort to bargain basement mercenaries, but his reputation as a war broker depended on delivering results. Access the secondary markets. Find me someone hungry. 2 hours of searching produced the Crimson Fang Company, a recently formed outfit composed primarily of young Korthani warriors seeking to establish their combat credentials. Their leader, a barely adult male named Greshtok, accepted the contract with embarrassing enthusiasm. "Humans?" Greshtok's voice crackled with bravado through the communicator. "My grandfather fought humans during the border wars. Said they were clever but fragile. Easy enough to break once you got past their tricks." Vexthon didn't mention that most veterans of the border wars were notably reluctant to discuss their experiences. The target location and tactical parameters are being transmitted now. Understood, Warbroker. The Crimson Fang will handle this easily. How dangerous could a bunch of miners be? As the connection terminated, Vexthon found himself hoping the young mercenary's confidence was justified. His professional reputation depended on it. Professor Yelnara had made a career of explaining the inexplicable, but today's lecture was testing even her considerable expertise in xenobiology. The amphitheater at Threnody Prime University buzzed with nervous energy as her students, representatives from 43 different species, settled into their bioadaptive seating. The topic displayed above her podium read, Evolutionary Warfare: Why Humans Fight Differently. Before we begin, Yelnara announced, her crystalline voice resonating through the chamber's acoustic dampeners, I want to address the obvious question. Yes, this course was developed in response to the Mercenary Guild's official request for academic analysis of human military behavior. No, we still don't have satisfactory answers. A tentacle shot up from the aquatic section. Professor, surely standard evolutionary, pressure models can explain any species' military development? Ah, Krelnash, always the optimist. Yelnara manipulated her teaching interface, projecting a three-dimensional star map above the gathered students. Let's examine that assumption. Most species develop warfare in response to resource competition, territorial disputes, or predator-prey relationships. Observe the Kithaeron expansion pattern. Systematic, logical, focused on strategic resource acquisition. The star map shifted, showing the methodical spread of Kithaeron influence across 17 systems. Neat arrows, calculated trajectories, predictable outcomes. Now observe human expansion. The display flickered, replacing orderly conquest patterns with something that resembled a child's scribble across the galaxy. Notice anything unusual? A morphic delegate raised what might have been an arm. It appears entirely random. Precisely, humans established colonies in systems with no apparent strategic value, ignored resource-rich worlds in favor of planets with interesting weather patterns, and somehow turned this chaos into a defensive advantage. Anyone care to explain how? The amphitheater fell silent. Finally, a young zealothy in the back spoke up. Perhaps they're simply irrational? Yelnara's teaching appendages clicked with amusement. That was my initial hypothesis. I spent 3 years analyzing human military history under the assumption that they were collectively insane. The results were illuminating. She activated another display, showing archived battle footage from the human-Centauri conflict. Watch carefully. Standard engagement doctrine suggests that when outnumbered 4-1, rational commanders retreat to defensible positions. The recording showed a human unit facing overwhelming Centauri forces. Instead of withdrawing, they advanced directly into enemy fire. Suicidal? Muttered someone from the Thermal Lords section. That's what the Centauri assumed, Yelnara agreed. Right up until the humans reached optimal range and deployed weapons that technically shouldn't have existed. They'd converted their life support systems into electromagnetic pulse generators. The footage showed Centauri forces collapsing as their cybernetic enhancements failed simultaneously. Within minutes, a tactical disaster had become a complete human victory. But that's impossible, protested a hive mind representative. Converting life support into weapons would kill the operators. Under normal circumstances, yes. However, humans had modified their biology using temporary genetic treatments that allowed them to survive in toxic atmospheric conditions for precisely the duration needed to complete their attack. They'd planned to sacrifice their breathing apparatus weeks before the battle began. The amphitheater erupted in shocked chittering, buzzing, and various untranslatable expressions of disbelief. This brings us to the core issue, Yelnara continued once the noise subsided. Human special operations units don't fight battles. They solve problems using warfare as one tool among many. They approach conflict like, how shall I put this? Like engineers approach malfunctioning equipment. A Threnody student near the front raised her vocalization organ. Professor, that's a fascinating metaphor, but surely you're anthropomorphizing their behavior. Am I? Let's examine the siege of Proxima Station. Another display materialized, showing a massive space installation surrounded by defensive fleets. Standard doctrine: siege warfare requires superior firepower and extended logistics support. The attacking human force numbered exactly 7 individuals. 7? The question came from multiple species simultaneously. 7 specialists in what humans call unconventional problem-solving. They didn't attack the station's defenses. They convinced the defenders that the station's artificial intelligence had been compromised by enemy infiltration. Within 6 hours, Proxima Station's own security forces had dismantled their defensive systems while searching for non-existent saboteurs. The silence that followed was profound enough that the amphitheater's environmental systems automatically adjusted for reduced atmospheric vibration. Finally, Krell-Nash from the aquatic section managed to form words. How did they accomplish this deception? They didn't deceive anyone, Yelnara replied calmly. They actually did compromise the station's AI, but only after the defenders began their security sweep. The humans used the investigation itself as cover to implement the very infiltration they'd been falsely accused of planning. Amorphic delegates form shifted colors rapidly, their species equivalent of a nervous breakdown. That's not military strategy. That's temporal warfare, supplied a Void Walker from the deep space section. They weaponized causality. Yelnara nodded approvingly. An excellent observation. Humans routinely violate linear tactical thinking. They plan backwards from desired outcomes, treating present circumstances as variables to be manipulated rather than constraints to be accepted. But surely, interrupted a Kithran officer, their success rate must be abysmal. Such chaotic methodology cannot be consistently effective. The professor's teaching appendages drooped slightly, a gesture her students had learned to recognize as academic melancholy. I'm afraid that's where our analysis becomes truly disturbing. Human Special Operations units maintain a mission success rate of approximately 94%. The number hung in the amphitheater's recycled atmosphere like a toxic cloud. Impossible, whispered the hive mind representative. Our tactical algorithms indicate that such inconsistent methodology should fail catastrophically. Yes, it should. Yelnara's voice carried a note of professional exhaustion. Which brings us to our final observation. Humans appear to operate according to strategic principles that transcend our current understanding of conflict theory. They don't just think outside conventional parameters. They think outside physics, psychology, and, occasionally, reality itself. A student from the Thermal Lords section raised what might have been a manipulator appendage. Professor, are you suggesting that humans possess supernatural abilities? Not supernatural, no, but they've developed cognitive flexibility that borders on the incomprehensible. They routinely generate solutions that work despite violating every known principle of military science. Then how do we defend against them? The question came from a young berserker cult initiate, her battle-scarred carapace clicking with agitation. Yelnara's pause stretched uncomfortably long. That, she finally admitted, is why the Mercenary Guild requested this course. The current consensus among military analysts is that the most effective defense against human special operations is prayer, assuming your species has developed appropriate deities. The amphitheater dissolved into chaos as students from dozens of species began arguing simultaneously in languages that translation systems couldn't parse fast enough. Through the cacophony, one voice cut clearly. Professor, what happens when someone is desperate enough to fight them anyway? The noise subsided as everyone waited for Yelnara's response. She manipulated her interface one final time, displaying a simple text message that had arrived during the lecture. "That question," she said quietly, "is about to be answered." According to this dispatch, the Crimson Fang Company engaged human forces on Kepler 186 approximately 3 hours ago. We should have preliminary battle reports within the day. Nobody asked what those reports might contain. They were all intelligent beings, after all. They could imagine. Commander Greshtok had expected many things when the Crimson Fang Company dropped onto Kepler 186. He'd anticipated fortified positions, automated defenses, perhaps even some clever ambush tactics. What he hadn't expected was silence. The mining complex sprawled across a valley floor like a metallic infection, its structures gleaming under the planet's twin suns. Sensor sweeps revealed exactly what the intelligence briefing had promised. Minimal energy signatures, standard civilian-grade equipment, no obvious military installations. It looked precisely like what it claimed to be: a routine extraction operation processing rare Earth elements. "Phase 1 complete," reported Scrixol, his second-in-command, from her position overlooking the facility. "No defensive response to our insertion. Target area appears unaware of our presence." Greshtok's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. Perhaps the veteran mercenaries had been overly cautious. Humans might be clever, but they were still biologicals operating with limited resources in an isolated location. "Squad leaders, report status." The responses crackled through his helmet comm with reassuring professionalism. 12 units, 43 warriors total, positioned around the mining complex in a textbook encirclement pattern. Every approach covered, every escape route blocked. By the manual, this engagement should conclude within 2 hours. "Movement detected," Scrixol announced. "Single individual, approximately 1 kilometer east of the primary processing center. Appears to be gardening?" Greshtok activated his long-range optics and focused on the indicated coordinates. A human in civilian coveralls knelt beside rows of cultivated plants, apparently tending to some form of agricultural project. The figure moved with casual indifference, occasionally pausing to examine soil samples or adjust irrigation lines. "Confirmed visual. Maintain observation." Greshtok switched to tactical frequency. "All units, we have 1 human in the open. Possible decoy or distraction. Remain alert for—" His words died as every scanner in his unit simultaneously registered massive electromagnetic interference. Communication channels dissolved into static. Targeting systems flickered between operational modes. Even basic environmental sensors began reporting impossible atmospheric readings. "What's happening?" Scrixol's voice barely penetrated the electronic chaos consuming their equipment. Through his malfunctioning optics, Greshtok watched the gardening human stand up, brush dirt from their hands, and wave cheerfully in his direction. Then the human reached into their coveralls and withdrew what appeared to be a standard agricultural tool, except no farming implement should generate enough focused electromagnetic energy to cripple military-grade electronics at a kilometer's distance. "All units, adapt to manual targeting. Maintain position discipline. This is just—" The explosion cut off his transmission. Not near his position. Somewhere behind the ridgeline where 3rd Squad had established overwatch. The blast resonated through the valley with an oddly musical quality, as if the detonation had been tuned to specific harmonic frequencies. His helmet comm sputtered back to life, carrying panicked voices from multiple unit leaders. "Squad leader down. Repeat, Thekmar is—" "Impossible. The charges were set for controlled demolition. How did they—" "Coming from inside the perimeter. Something's wrong with—" Greshtok forced discipline into his voice. "All units, report by numbers. 1 squad, position compromised. Unknown explosive devices triggered during our advance. Casualties unknown. We're falling back to—" The transmission ended with sounds that military training hadn't prepared Greshtok to interpret. 2 squad? Static. 3 squad. Respond. More static, punctuated by what might have been laughter. 4 through 12, sound off immediately. The responses came sporadically, each more concerning than the last. Units were discovering that their carefully planned positions had been subtly modified during the night. Weapon caches contained ammunition that exploded when fired. Environmental suits registered atmospheric toxins that didn't exist. Squad leaders reported seeing movement in areas their sensors insisted were empty. "Sir," Scrixal's voice carried an edge of hysteria that violated everything Greshtok knew about Korthony psychological conditioning. "The gardening human is gone." Greshtok focused his malfunctioning optics on the agricultural area. Empty. No trace of the figure he'd observed moments earlier, no indication of how they'd departed, no footprints in the carefully tended soil. "Impossible. Maintain surveillance on—" "Sir, there are 12 humans now." "What?" 12 humans. Different locations. All engaged in civilian activities. I'm reading one individual repairing atmospheric processors, another conducting geological surveys. Someone else appears to be cooking. Greshotok's tactical display, flickering between operational states, confirmed Scrixal's impossible report. Humans had appeared throughout the mining complex, each engaged in perfectly normal industrial activities, none showing awareness of the military force surrounding them. "Orders, sir?" Scrixal's question carried undertones of species-wide terror that Korthani warriors weren't supposed to experience. Before Greshtok could respond, his proximity sensors activated. Something was approaching his concealed position, something that registered as simultaneously human-sized, equipment-sized, and entirely absent, depending on which scanner he consulted. A voice spoke from directly behind him. "Commander Greshtok, I presume?" He spun, weapons ready, to face a human in standard mining coveralls who had somehow materialized within his defensive perimeter. The individual appeared completely relaxed, hands empty, expression friendly. "How did you get here?" "I walked. Your concealment techniques are impressive, by the way. We almost didn't notice your landing." The human's tone suggested genuine admiration, as if they were discussing weather patterns rather than military infiltration. "We? There are only 12 of us, yes. Though I should mention that's just the administrative staff. The actual defense team is much smaller. Greshtock's training kicked in. Regardless of how this human had reached his position, one target was manageable. He raised his primary weapon and discovered it had been disassembled. Not damaged or destroyed, but carefully taken apart and reassembled into something that resembled abstract sculpture. "Kinetic weapons are so limiting," the human observed. "We found that most conflicts benefit from more creative approaches." "What do you want?" "Want? Nothing, really. You're here to eliminate our operation. We're here to prevent that. Standard territorial dispute. The interesting question is methodology." Greshtok activated his emergency beacon, hoping to coordinate with surviving unit members. The device produced a soft, chiming sound and began projecting holographic butterflies. "Your technical specialist has a sense of humor," the human noted approvingly, "though I suspect your troops might find the modifications disconcerting." "What modifications?" "Oh, various improvements. Better targeting systems, enhanced communication arrays, upgraded ammunition feeds. Very thoughtful upgrades, really. Your people should be impressed with the new capabilities." From across the valley came sounds that suggested Greshtock's surviving warriors were discovering these improvements. Explosions, confused shouting, and increasingly creative profanity echoed off the surrounding hills. "You're not miners," Greshtok said quietly. "Actually, we are. Mining requires extensive knowledge of controlled demolitions, geological assessment, environmental modification, and industrial chemistry. Turns out those skills have broader applications than most people realize." What are you? The human smiled with genuine warmth. Problem solvers, Commander. Your employer presented us with a problem. Armed forces attempting to disrupt our operation. We're solving it. By killing my troops? Killing? The human looked genuinely surprised. We're not killing anyone. We're demonstrating alternative perspectives on conflict resolution. Greshtalk's tactical training suggested several responses, none of which seemed applicable to his current situation. What alternative perspectives? Well, for example, consider the philosophical question. If a warrior's equipment transforms into interpretive art, is the warrior still a warrior? Your troops are exploring that concept quite thoroughly. The sounds from across the valley had shifted from combat noises to something resembling confused archaeological excavation, mixed with abstract poetry recitation. What did you do to them? We gave them new objectives. Instead of eliminating us, they're now engaged in creative self-expression through tactical reinterpretation. Much more fulfilling than standard military operations. Greshtalk felt reality beginning to slip away from familiar moorings. That's not possible. Commander, you hired mercenaries to attack a mining operation defended by 12 humans. Your tactical assessment indicated overwhelming superiority. Yet here we are, having a pleasant conversation while your forces discovered the therapeutic benefits of non-violent conflict resolution. The human's smile widened. What about this situation seems possible to you? Before Greshtalk could respond, his helmet comm crackled with Scrixel's voice, except she was singing. Not distress calls or tactical reports, but what sounded like an improvised opera about the aesthetic properties of decomposed weapons. We should probably collect your people, the human suggested kindly. They've had quite enough creative exploration for one day. Collect them? For extraction, naturally. This engagement has concluded. Your forces have successfully discovered that military objectives can be reimagined as artistic endeavors. We consider that a complete victory for everyone involved. Greshtalk stared at this impossibly calm individual who had somehow transformed a straightforward military operation into something his training manuals hadn't prepared him to classify. What are you people? He whispered. The human considered the question seriously. We're exactly what we've always been, Commander. We're humans. The real question is, what are you going to tell people about what happened here? Looking across the valley, where his elite mercenary company was apparently conducting an impromptu festival of experimental warfare poetry, Greshtalk realized that question had no acceptable answer. None whatsoever. The debriefing chamber aboard Nexus Station had seen its share of uncomfortable post-mission reports, but nothing quite like the collection of beings currently occupying its adaptive seating. Warbroker Vexthon studied the survivors of the Crimson Fang Company with professional fascination and growing dread. They sat in perfect silence, each staring at some invisible point in space, occasionally humming fragments of melodies that somehow harmonized, despite originating from entirely different species. Commander Greshtalk, Vexthon began carefully, your preliminary report contained several inconsistencies. The Korthani warrior's gaze focused slowly, as if returning from vast distances. Inconsistencies, he repeated, the word carrying undertones of philosophical contemplation. Yes, reality itself proved inconsistent with our expectations. Perhaps you could elaborate on the tactical situation that led to your company's reinterpretation. Greshtalk's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or existential crisis. We were transformed into art critics, warbroker. Our weapons became sculptures. Our communication systems generated poetry. My second-in-command spent 3 hours analyzing the aesthetic properties of exploded ammunition. That's impossible. So we thought. Yet Scrixel produced 17 stanzas examining the relationship between military failure and creative expression. Quite profound, actually. Vexthon's assistant leaned forward. Sir, the medical scans show no evidence of hallucinogenic compounds or psychological manipulation. Because there wasn't any, Greshtok said simply. The humans didn't drug us or compromise our mental faculties. They simply demonstrated that our understanding of conflict was limited. How do 12 minors defeat 43 professional warriors? They don't defeat you. Greshtock's voice carried the weight of revelation. They demonstrate that the concept of defeat itself is merely one perspective among many. We went to Kepler 186 to eliminate a threat. We discovered that we were the threat to our own assumptions about reality. Vexthon felt his neural tendrils beginning to cramp. That's philosophical nonsense. Is it? We attacked a mining operation. The miners defended themselves by revealing that mining and warfare utilize identical skill sets, just with different intended outcomes. They were extracting resources from hostile environments. We were resources in a hostile environment. The mathematics was quite elegant. Commander, I need actionable intelligence. How do we counter human tactics? Greshtock's expression shifted into something resembling pity. Warbroker, you're asking the wrong question. The humans didn't employ tactics. They employed perspective. They looked at our military operation and saw opportunities for educational demonstration. Educational? They taught us that conflict resolution encompasses approaches we hadn't considered. Very patient instructors, actually. When traditional battle failed to produce desired outcomes, they guided us through alternative methodologies workshop. Vexthon stood abruptly, his professional composure finally fracturing. This is meaningless babble. I have clients demanding explanations, not poetry. Then, perhaps, came a new voice from the chamber's entrance. We should provide some clarity. Every being in the room turned toward the speaker. A human in unremarkable civilian clothing who somehow commanded immediate attention, despite possessing no obvious authority markers. How did you gain access to this facility? Vexthon demanded. I requested permission from station administration. Quite politely, I might add. The human stepped into the chamber with casual confidence. My name is Specialist Chen. I represent the Kepler 186 operation. Specialist Chen, Greshtok said with what sounded like genuine respect. I didn't expect to see you again. Educational opportunities rarely end with single demonstrations, Commander. Today's session covers advanced concepts in conflict management. Vexthon's primary eyes bulged. This is a restricted military briefing. Is it? Chen glanced around the chamber with mild curiosity. I see survivors processing traumatic recontextualization, a warbroker struggling with professional inadequacy, and various support personnel discovering that their expertise applies to situations they hadn't previously considered. Looks like a classroom to me. What do you want? Chen settled into an empty chair that hadn't existed moments earlier. Understanding. Your organization facilitates violent solutions to resource disputes. Our organization facilitates non-violent resource extraction. There's potential for professional synergy. You destroyed my mercenary company. Actually, we demonstrated alternative career paths. Several of your former employees have expressed interest in pursuing artistic careers. Quite talented, really. Scrixall's work shows particular promise. Vexthon's assistant consulted her datapad. Sir, we've received 17 resignation letters from surviving Crimson Fang personnel. They're all requesting transfers to cultural development positions. See? Win-win outcomes. Chen smiled with apparent satisfaction. Everyone discovers new aspects of their potential. This is economic sabotage, Vexthon protested. You're undermining an entire industry. We're demonstrating market evolution. Military conflict represents inefficient resource allocation. Our methodology produces superior outcomes with minimal material waste. What methodology? What did you do to them? Chen's expression grew thoughtful. We showed them that every problem has multiple solutions, and every solution reveals new problems. Your mercenaries were trained to apply kinetic force to obstacle removal. We taught them that obstacles can be redefined as opportunities for creative problem-solving. That's not an answer. Sure it is. You hired people to eliminate us using violent approaches. We eliminated their violence using educational approaches. Net result: same objective achieved, but everyone benefits from expanded perspective. Greshtok leaned forward. Specialist Chen, may I ask a professional question? Of course. Are you actually miners? We extract valuable resources from challenging environments using advanced techniques and specialized equipment. What would you call that? Military special operations. Interesting perspective. We call it Tuesday. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft humming of environmental systems and Skrixal's continued melodic examination of tactical philosophy. Finally, Vexthon found his voice. What happens now? Chen stood up, the chair disappearing as casually as it had appeared. Now you have a choice, war broker. Continue facilitating traditional conflict resolution, knowing that human operations will consistently transform your mercenaries into philosophical artists, or consider alternative business models that don't rely on violence as problem-solving methodology. And if I choose traditional approaches, then you'll discover that reputation is the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. Word spreads, you know. Soon every mercenary in the sector will know that human contracts lead to unexpected career changes. Supply and demand economics suggest your business model may require adjustment. Chen moved toward the chamber exit, pausing at the threshold. Oh, and war broker? You might want to update your company insurance policies. Claims for existential paradigm shifts aren't typically covered under standard mercenary contracts. As the human departed, Vexthon stared at the space they'd vacated, then at the survivors still processing their transformed world-view. Sir? His assistant ventured quietly. Update our contract database, Vexthon said with the tone of someone accepting inevitable defeat. Add a new category, human operations, educational consultation only. What classification code should I use? Vexthon watched Greshtok begin sketching tactical diagrams that resembled abstract art, while Skrixal composed what appeared to be a sonnet about the emotional resonance of disassembled weaponry. Coded as applied philosophy, he decided, and append a warning. Results may include involuntary career transitions and spontaneous creative expression. His assistant's fingers paused over her input device. Sir, what do we tell clients who specifically want to engage human forces? Vexthon considered this carefully. Through the observation port, he could see other war brokers conducting similar debriefings with their own traumatized survivors, each discovering that humanity's reputation had been thoroughly understated. Tell them the truth, he said finally. Humans don't fight wars, they solve problems, and apparently we've all been problems in need of solving. The irony wasn't lost on him. In trying to eliminate human operations, they'd created the ultimate advertisement for human capabilities. Soon, every mercenary outfit in the galaxy would know exactly what happened when professionals encountered humans who treated warfare as just another engineering challenge. Reputation, as Specialist Chen had noted, was indeed the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. And humanity now owned all of it